Man accidentally gets $2.8 million. This week, the United States Treasury started conveying upgrade installments to American citizens, with numerous individuals awakening to discover a store in their financial balances. This first flood of installments are going out by means of direct store, and others will see their physical checks show up over the coming weeks. For most Americans who make under $75,000, they will get an installment of $1,200. Couples whose consolidated salary of under $150,000 will get $2,400, and anybody with kids matured 16 or under will get an extra $500. Charles Calvine, a volunteer firefighter in New Chicago, Indiana, was stunned when he checked his record balance at an ATM and found that his record was $8.2 million more extravagant than he anticipated. He checked the equalization twice, however it didn't change. Tragically for Mr. Calvine, life isn't care for Monopoly's bank blunder in support of you, so he didn't get the chance to keep the cash. In a meeting, Calvine stated, "It sort of sucks. You go from being a tycoon 1 second, at that point back to being bankrupt once more. Be that as it may, hello, when you're poor, you don't have any place else to go." However up. Oil production slashed in deepest cut ever, as an ever-increasing number of individuals remain at home to keep the spread of COVID-19 under control. Different ventures the world over observe a drop sought after for their items. The business that is getting hit the hardest is simply the oil business, which finds with a plentiful inventory, yet little interest. This has brought about the drafting of a consent to cut deals of oil for the long periods of May and June. OPEC, Russia, and Mexico reported on Sunday that they had consented to cut creation by 9.7 million barrels per day, the most profound cut of its sort at any point consented to. The drop in deals has cost OPEC altogether as vitality requests far and wide keep on falling. This has prompted the absolute least expensive gas costs in the 21st century, and any slices underway will serve to restrain the harm the debilitated interest has caused. The understanding is recorded, however it just records for around 10% of the world's typical oil supply, making it a noteworthy initial phase in moderating the vitality surplus issues confronting OPEC. The last significant decrease came during the 2008 monetary emergency, which saw a slow decrease totaling 4.2 million barrels per day. World's longest animal discovered. Researchers of the Western Australian Museum found another species, which is currently the longest life form at any point found. The revelation was made on board the Schmidt Ocean Institute, and distinguished a new animal while investigating the abyssal deep-sea canyons off Ningaloo. The critter being referred to is another sort of a Polemia siphonophore, which is a type of thick string that can develop to inconceivable lengths. The life forms have an extraordinary methods for propagation, which is the manner by which they get the chance to be the length of they are. A siphonophore doesn't grow a solitary body like most creatures, it clones itself again and again, a large number of times by means of a few sorts of specific clone cells, which are hung together. The newfound siphonophore estimated and expected 150 feet, making it the longest of its species at any point found, and the longest single life form known to exist. Siphonophores are remote ocean animals that subsist on little scavengers and fish. Most are deft feeders, which spread out over enormous zones with stinging limbs, so passers-by can be caught and gradually processed. The recently distinguished species spreads itself out into what is depicted as a UFO-like taking care of stance. Sailor died of coronavirus infection on controversial ship. 14 days prior, the captain of the USS Theodore Roosevelt was eased of obligation after an email he composed was spilled to the general population. That activity was before long followed with the acquiescence of the acting Secretary of the Navy over the issue, which emerged from the captain's email about the condition of the boat in the midst of the COVID-19 emergency. Tragically, the USS Theodore Roosevelt keeps on standing out as truly newsworthy. as the Navy gave an account of Monday that a sailor had passed on from intricacies coming about because of a COVID-19 contamination. The sailor, Aviation Ordnance Man Chief Petty Officer Charles Robert Thacker Jr., was first determined to have the infection on March 30. During an everyday clinical check, he was seen as inert, and after CPR neglected to restore him, he was moved to an intensive care unit at a Navy medical clinic. He kicked the bucket a brief time frame later. The USS Theodore Roosevelt has become the focal point of the Navy's COVID-19 episode, and as of Thursday, in excess of 600 individuals from the group have tried positive for the infection. Altogether, 93% of the group have been tried, and endeavors are in progress to stop the spread as more sailors wind up admitted to the ICU. First March since 2002 to not have a school shooting. There was anything but a solitary school shooting in the United States in March 2020. The news here isn't that there wasn't a shooting to such an extent as it was the principle marching quite a while to not have one. Since 2002, each long stretch of March has been set apart with a school shooting or something to that effect. That is a solid 18-year record. In addition to the fact that that is huge news in regards to acts of mass violence in the United States, but on the other hand it's critical that school terminations have made this stretch the longest. A few understudies have abandoned a shooting. The last March without a school shooting came in 2002, which implies the seniors in secondary school this year have survived each time of their training with a shooting during that month. Presently, saying this doesn't imply that each school around the nation makes them during March, yet the occurrences that do happen regularly influence understudies around the nation whether they are nearby or not. In 2002, there were a few near calamities, yet no shots were discharged in spite of an occasion on March 20 of that year, when an 8th grade understudy brought a 22-gauge weapon to class with 50 rounds of ammunition. 5. In the interests of complete straightforwardness, it ought to be noticed that the two shootings in 2019 were both from outer sources, a drive-by shooting incidentally hitting a school transport, and an unintentional firearm release in a college, so 2019 can likewise be considered actually to have had no acts of mass violence. German zoos to feed animals to each other. On Tuesday, a zoo in Germany declared that it may need to start taking care of their creatures too. Their creatures. The stunning declaration came as financing for zoos is evaporating in numerous spots far and wide. Verena Kaspari of the Neumünster Zoo stated, if, and this is actually the most noticeably awful, most pessimistic scenario of all, on the off chance that I no longer have any cash to purchase feed, or on the off chance that it ought to happen that my feed provider is not, at this point ready to convey because of new limitations, at that point I would butcher creatures to take care of different creatures. In the event that those measures are established, the zoo's prized polar bear, Vitis, might be the last creature standing, in the midst of the emergency, which originates from a total absence of guests because of social separating. Germany's National Zoo Association is begging the administration for €100 million in help, not at all like most organizations shut down due to COVID-19. Zoos require constant upkeep to guarantee the well-being and security of its creatures. The normal German zoo is seeing a week-by-week loss of around €500,000, and without assistance, the creatures will start to vanish. South Korea has in-person elections without a hitch. On Thursday, the decision liberal gathering made sure about its triumph in the country's parliamentary races, which saw the most elevated turnout in right around 3 decades. At the point when all the votes were checked, 66.2% of voters cast their voting forms, which is the most elevated number since 1992's general political race. The huge turnout was amazing, given the spread of COVID-19 in the nation, yet the administration's execution of social separating rules at its surveying stations made it simpler for the voters to come out and make their choice securely. The decision party joined with a satellite gathering it made to increase 180 seats in the 300-seat National Assembly. On the other hand, The preservationists saw their most noticeably terrible demonstrating the thickly populated capital city has found in years. By making sure about such a vast lion's share for his gathering, President Moon Jae-in will have a simple way to seeking after his household and international strategy destinations, for example, restoring discretionary talks with North Korea. Popularity-based party pioneer Lee Hae-chan talked during a gathering meeting, saying, "We feel substantial obligation, which exceeds our delight of winning the political race. We will put forth preemptive and forceful attempts to beat the novel coronavirus emergency and the risky stances to jobs and the national economy." Actor Brian Dennehy dies at the age of 81, on Wednesday. Veteran entertainer of stage and screen, Brian Dennehy died from regular causes. His little girl, Elizabeth Dennehy, posted a tweet affirming his passing. "It is with crushing sadness we declare that our dad, Brian, spent away the previous evening from normal causes, not COVID-related. Overwhelming, liberal to say the least, a glad and dedicated dad and granddad. He will be remembered fondly by his significant other Jennifer, family and numerous companions." Dennehy died from heart failure because of sepsis in his New Haven, Connecticut home. Dennehy's profession spread over 7 decades and remembered work for TV, film, and theater. He was most likely most popular for playing Sheriff Will Teasdale in First Blood, Another Disgusting Sheriff in Silverado, his work in Cocoon, FX, Presumed Innocent, and a lot more ventures. His work earned him 2 Tony Awards, the Golden Globe Award for Best Actor in a Miniseries or Television Film, and 6 Primetime Emmy Award nominations. Dennehy kept functioning admirably into the year, and his last 2 film ventures, Son of the South and Long Day Journey, will be discharged after death. Additionally important, Tim Brooke Taylor likewise passed on this week on the 12th of April. Mr. Brooke Taylor was most popular by British, Australian, and New Zealand aficionados of the insane TV program The Goodies, where he had an enormous impact. He kicked the bucket, matured 79 of confusions from coronavirus. President Trump halts funding to the WHO. On Tuesday, President Trump requested a hang-on $400 million expected for the World Health Organization for seriously blundering and concealing the spread of the coronavirus. The U.S. president further clarified that the fact of the matter is the WHO neglected to get, vet, and offer data in an opportune manner, and proceeded to state, "The WHO bombed in its fundamental obligation and must be held accountable." Trump's reaction to the flare-up has been under heightening examination recently, and with this request, he is setting a great deal of the fault to the WHO, which asked President Trump not to establish his underlying prohibition on movement from China, and has kept on towing the Chinese Communist partisan principle. The WHO at last cautioned of the potential spread of COVID-19 from China on January 23, and on the 30th, the Director General proclaimed the coronavirus episode a public health emergency of international concern, (PHIC), which is the WHO's most elevated alarm level. The U.S. was the biggest supporter of the association's generally $2.8 billion yearly spending plan. Google censorship veil slips revealing anti-Jewish images. If you want to search the web for anti-Semitic or Holocaust denial information, you can do so directly, but those same results are now popping up on less direct terms related to Judaism, despite Google's claim that it's fixed the problem through filtration and censorship. Recently, benign search terms relating to Jews will yield controversial results if you do a Google Images search. If you head to Google Images and type in Oive, the suggestions will include merchant, Shoah, 6 trillion, a reference to the belief that the Holocaust casualty numbers are grossly overstated, and Shlomo. The majority of images that show up are from websites like Chinese-owned Reddit, 4chan, 8chan, and others of a similar ilk. Clicking on any of the suggestions found under the search box will take the user down a rabbit hole of anti-Semitism that devolves the deeper and deeper you venture. For example, clicking on 6 million takes you to an addition to that term. 6 million wasn't enough. Google has faced backlash over its algorithm's return on these terms for years and has repeatedly increased censorship to filter out the offending results, but it seems to be having little to no effect.